Hi, Dorothy.
Should we begin?
Hi, Neil.
Should we begin? Alright, hi everybody. Welcome to my 8th class in this 12-part series. And next time if I do a long series of classes, I'm going to break it up. And maybe not go over the whole summer. So I'm so glad you guys are all staying with me and getting through this. It's interesting stuff. So anyway, I want to welcome you all. This is my 8th class. Again, if anybody would like me to send you a copy of these PowerPoint presentations, sometimes I go a little fast, and you might want to just read them for yourselves. Just give me send me an email at Yvette@light.org, and I will send you any PowerPoint presentation you want. So there's that. And Alice Marie, you asked for them before, so I will send you the last 3 that I've had. Anyway, because you seem to be interested. So. And with that, I don't think I have any other announcements, and we'll get to our class. So it's Chapter 8, Correct Use of Affirmations. Okay, we're going to start off with some definitions, per usual. Alright, so Zane's definition of affirmation is a statement of a condition given to the individual by himself or by another in the manner deemed best suited to reach his unconscious mind and through suggestion bring its realization. That is, an affirmation is a suggestion that a certain condition is a reality. And then the dictionary definition is to say positively, declare firmly, assert to be true. So in Zane's definition, we're reaching into the unconscious and bringing it out. So if an individual repeats to himself in a positive manner, such as, I'm in perfect health, this may bring to the attention of the unconscious mind the image of perfect health. If the affirmation can divert enough energy to the realization of that image, it will markedly change the thought cell's organization within the astral body. Again, the key word is it may, and we're going to talk about that a little more. If the affirmation succeeds in gaining sufficient attention and energy from the unconscious mind to alter the composition or arrangement of the thought cells responsible for the disease, whether it is a disease of the body or of some other department of life, the fortune of the person will be altered. So, if the affirmation succeeds in gaining sufficient attention and energy from the unconscious mind, then your fortune will be changed, will be altered. If it succeeds in changing the thought organization of the astral body into the normal expression of health, then the disease will vanish. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah. Disease free.
However, again, the reason why we want to look into our unconscious mind and see what's there and what has been conditioned there, the reason that it might not, because, here, let me just read here as we go. The predisposition to a particular disease is due to the energy of thought cells that have entered into relations with other thought cells in a discordant manner in the astral body. Okay, so that's the beginning of disease. It starts in the astral body with your thought cells and emotions in discord. These relationships between the thought cells are mapped in the birth chart by the prominence and the aspects of the planets. And the prominence is your the power levels on your astrology, and then your aspects. There are many factors involved, however, as to whether or not the repetition of the assertion, I am in perfect health, will bring perfect health. One chief factor is the manner that the thought cells in the unconscious mind have already been conditioned. So, this whole chapter is a lot of psychology, regular psychology. I looked up a lot of stuff online for definition stuff, but we're sticking a lot to psychology in this chapter. So what was it? Oh yeah, okay. So the chief factor in the manner that the thought cells in the unconscious mind have already been conditioned. might be a reason why it might not, perfect health might not come about. So an example, if a person has a strong and afflicted Saturn in their birth chart, which expresses a tendency to be suspicious and look for ulterior motives, then this type of suggestion of perfect health may merely draw their unconscious minds to attention to illness instead of health. When the unconscious mind receives that suggestion, it may connect up with the idea that if there were no illness, then there would be no need for an attempt to cure it. So if you're suspicious of every positive thing, then that affirmation might not work for you. I am in perfect health. So an association of ideas may lead to an image in the unconscious mind of the exact opposite of the intended image of the affirmation. Or it may inject the idea that the person really has no power to really heal him or herself.
This is a powerless individual.
Right? That's what a sick thing. That's what I labeled it. So this will weaken the power of the suggestion if another idea is injected that you have no power to heal yourself. So again, looking into your unconscious mind and seeing what's there can really help you, and that way you can use affirmations for a positive thing. An example 2, if a person is habitually a coward and repeats the affirmation, I am brave, may merely draw the unconscious mind's attention to the person's fear more strongly. So, action is always toward the image receiving attention. The function of the attention is to direct the desire energies toward the object of attention. That is, the unconscious mind has been conditioning its thought cells and thought organizations to mobilize their desire energies and direct them toward the object or condition held before the attention. The image of thought reaching the thought cells creates a command within the unconscious mind. Therefore, it is not the suggestion that is given which releases and directs desire energies. It is the image or thought which is actually present that directs the desire energies. So there's, now I'm talking about suggestion. The affirmation and suggestion is what that stuff brings up into your mind, the images and the thoughts that are associated with those words that you create as an affirmation or a suggestion. So, auto-suggestion and negative desires. So, this one you can't read what this says very well, so I wrote it down here. Imagine if that was your interview for a job. You're gonna walk this weight rope. You're willing to take a risk? You can work for us. Okay, so now we're going to talk about negative desires. A negative desire is a desire straining to find release in a direction opposed to that of the objective mind's intention. So there's still desire, but we call it negative because it's going in opposite direction of what we want. When the image presented to the unconscious mind is such as to release energies in the direction that is opposite of that intention of the objective consciousness, it gives rise to a negative desire. Oops. Let me be careful. Okay, it is called negative in the sense that, like an alternating electric current wave, which moves in one direction as a positive impulse and in the opposite direction as a negative impulse. So, not always is it bad, it's just in the opposite direction, I guess is what he's saying. And now
Yvette, go back to that one again.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to absorb that.
Okay.
It is called negative
In the sense.
that, like an alternating electric current wave, which moves in one direction as a positive. Okay.
Okay.
So it's just a different direction.
Right. See, this is the example. This is like the zero line. Like this is the best I could pull off the internet. But this is like a zero line. Here you have positive numbers, and here you have negative numbers.
Right.
No,
Well, is he implying that there's always a negative for every positive? I guess that's what he's implying.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So not everything works as easy as it sounds. Like you can't just make an affirmation and then it happens. There's all these other things going on.
Oh, no.
There's always the negative side, the opposite, right? Otherwise, life would be so easy. And then we have auto-suggestions. Okay, so what an auto-suggestion is, the definition according to Zane, is because of the manner in which the thought cells have been previously conditioned, the unconscious mind directs its attention, more or less, to a different thought rather than to a thought that is offered by a suggestion. That is, an auto-suggestion is a suggestion furnished by the unconscious mind. And then the dictionary definition is suggestion to oneself arising within one's own mind and having effects on one's thinking and bodily functions. So basically, it's like an auto-suggestion is like if you have that I am in perfect health, an auto-suggestion, if what comes up when you say that, all of a sudden you think, oh, illness, then that's an auto-suggestion. It just comes right up and you're just like, oh, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. That would be an auto-suggestion. An illustration of how auto-suggestion often gives rise to negative desires. So in this example, consider that idea that it is no more difficult to walk a 12-inch steel girder when it is 100 feet off from the ground with nothing on air on either side than it is to walk the same girder when it rests firmly on the earth. A person can easily walk the girder while it sits on the ground, yet it seems harder to do while up in the air.
Right.
Yeah.
In order to do that, you have to convince yourself that you're on the ground.
Right. You can't look down.
Unless you're completely fearless.
Right. Right. So the auto-suggestion will bring up before the attention of the unconscious mind the image of falling off the girder. Then there will be a tendency to fall or feel like you will fall, because action is in the direction in which the attention is directed. So if that auto-suggestion comes up all of a sudden, and that's where you put your attention, then that's what's going to happen, is where the action is going to be. And the attention is in the direction of the desire energy to be released, which is in the direction of the image of falling, which is a negative desire image. As the objective mind's intention is not to fall, the energy thus tending to cause a fall is called a negative desire. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay. I may have a perfect example for that.
Yeah?
Yeah, we go on these bike rides
Yeah.
along the irrigation ditches.
Okay.
And it's, it's very narrow little tracks. And sometimes these little tracks are, they come close to the edge of the water, or they have trees, stumps that are, in the path or whatever. So they can be a little gnarly to get
Right.
through. And so one time, when I first started doing this, I was absolutely and totally fearless. I could go past those canals, inch up to the water, never even think twice, because I would convince myself that, hey, it's no different from when I have lots of space on either side.
Yeah.
And then I fell. And now all I can think of is fall.
So experience has taught you the auto-suggestion. Oh no, I'm going to fall.
Yeah, right. It's got this thing that I haven't worked through yet.
Right. Well, now the safety urges have come into play, right?
Exactly.
All right. Okay, so detecting possible auto-suggestions. So that one is an auto-suggestion. Death. If we don't get this done. All right. So one method of discerning what probable auto-suggestions will develop from using a given affirmation or string of words is to employ the method of free association. To do this, while in a relaxed state of mind, which is most favorable to receiving a suggestion, state an affirmation once, just as it is intended, and then let the mind drift. Note any associations, images, or words this affirmation brings up into the conscious mind when permitted to follow the line of free association. If images arise in the mind which are positive and successfully overcomes obstacles in the mind or accomplishes some desired purpose, then the words should be included in the affirmation. But if the images arise in which there is a lack of strength, which brings disaster, or in which lack of something in any manner brings a disagreeable experience in your free association, then those words should not be used in your affirmation, and other words should be sought to use in your affirmation. So you're going to tailor make your own affirmation. Not everybody's affirmation is going to work for everybody else. Right? Some people are so negative, which can be shown by certain planets prominent in their birth charts, that almost any suggestion offered to them in a very positive manner is made negative by their unconscious minds. And other people are so positive, which can also be shown by certain planets prominent in their birth charts, that suggestions offered by themselves or others tend to develop autosuggestion images of a positive nature. Now, and it's not all just your planets, though, you know? It's going to be past conditioning, too, that's going to, negativity and positivity and stuff.
I think you're just talking about using the birth chart.
Okay, if you want to use the birth chart.
It's not the exclusive realm of astrology, though, to do an affirmation.
So, a study of your birth chart mapping the thought cells and thought structures responsible, and by testing out through the method of free association, the tendency towards certain autosuggestions can be ascertained. Then such words or such methods can be avoided that tend to release energy in the direction of negative desires. These tendencies of the individual to react in a particular way because of basic temperament must be taken into consideration when applying suggestion and creating affirmations. And affirmations can be devised such that their associations in the unconscious mind will connect them up with powerful desires already there, directing all energies into the desired channel. Okay, self-consciousness. You see this? The beginning of self-consciousness. Holy smoke, I'm standing here! Help! I love it. Okay, so self-consciousness is always due to a negative desire that arises from an autosuggestion. The self-conscious individual has within his or herself unconscious mind, within his or her unconscious mind, such strong desires to appear to look good before others that the very thought of committing any little blunder is very painful. It may be all well enough for others to exhibit imperfection, but to keep his or her own sense of perfection in the scheme of things, it is imperative that she make an exceptional impression upon others. Now, a couple of places I put the he, she thing, but when I read it, I'm just going to put the masculine, if that's okay with everybody. You know?
It's not okay with me.
Okay. Because my words get all tangled up, so I'll just do the he part, you know. And I think that's what Zane said too with his books. It's just easier in one.
Well, when I was a kid going to school,
Yeah.
you were taught that the masculine pronouns were the universal pronouns.
Right.
And that, of course, being a female, I wondered about that. I didn't quite like that.
Right, because you know what? When I started changing and making it she, he, because you kind of get an image in your mind when you're reading him. You think of a guy. I mean, I do. I imagine a person of a guy, of the nature of a man.
Right.
And when I changed it to he, she, I thought, oh yeah, it can be a female.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's subconscious in us that when we're reading it, hey, we're thinking of a he.
Well, it's like, everybody knows that God is a he, right?
It's an it. No.
Well,
he, she,
and
universal.
he, she, I think, yeah, exactly, right.
He, she, or it's both. Maybe it's both. Alright. So often the person has over-conditioned their thoughts so that he magnifies the importance of effect of her actions. Or I could just use her.
Like that.
We'll just put all the blame on the man. Let's see. Okay. And the very excess of these demands increases the autosuggestion that he will not be able to meet these self-imposed requirements. So when a person is self-conscious, they have an over expectation of themselves to be perfect and this and that, and it brings up auto-suggestion of the imperfection that they actually do have, which everybody knows everybody has imperfection, but people can build it up so high in their minds that they want to be so perfect, and they know they're not, and so they build up themselves to failure. And the subconscious person is often thinking of all the failure that's going to happen. So suppose a person who is self-conscious is called upon to give a public speech. This person's conscious desire is to, let's say, stand out as a superior public speaker. The person's auto-suggestion may arise that his or her own actions will not be up to his or her own expectations. Very good. Okay, so I'm trying something a little new where there was lots of wordiness in the books. It's good information, but I decided not to put everything up here, like as Paul suggested. So I'm going to read you more about this example here. Okay, so this person's auto-suggestion may arise that his own actions will not be up to his own expectations. Thus is his attention drawn to other things than what he's actually trying to do, which is to make a public speech. He thinks of his audience and what they will think of him, and this distracts from the clearness of his thought. Because his attention can only be given to one area at a time. This connects up with a fear of appearing ridiculous, which brings up to his attention the image or thought of his failure. Faced with the possibility of failure in a manner which means so much to him, creates an emergency. An emergency is met by a release of desire energy sufficiently intense to be termed an emotion. The emotion in turn releases chemical messengers or hormones from his ductless glands into the bloodstream. These mobilize the body to meet the emergency. Blood rushes to his face and he flushes, or it rushes to certain organs and away from his face, and he grows pale. The stress on his nerves carrying the etheric currents, which have the energy of emergency desires, is too great for control, and he trembles, or perhaps his knees shake. And his awareness that he is not behaving according to the superior standard he has set for himself still further draws his attention to the image of blunders and failure. These images then divert the desire energies into activities of failure instead of success. So that was kind of the thought processes of how it can happen, to do the very opposite of what you really want to happen. So previous frustrations of the drive for significance may have developed self-consciousness or an inferiority complex. The drive for significance, having been thwarted somehow, has accumulated desires through excess energy that expresses as an exaggeration in all matters relating to those desires. So you're saying that your drive for significance plays a role in this self-consciousness. Of course, any special desires that have been over-conditioned through having excessive emotional energy imparted to them may afford auto-suggestions that give rise to negative desires. Because the three hereditary drives have acquired so much energy, they are the ones which more commonly cause the most difficulty. They are the drive for significance, the drive for race preservation, and the drive for self-preservation. So we have already considered examples of the effect of negative desires due to auto-suggestions afforded by the drive for self-preservation in the steel girder, and the drive for significance and the self-consciousness when presenting a speech. Let us now take an example of negative desires due to the auto-suggestions of the drive for race preservation. People sometimes exhibit a decided and painful bashfulness in the presence of the opposite sex. Such an individual has an overwhelming desire to appear to the best advantage before the object of the affection. It is of tremendous importance that he make a fine impression. And that's when you begin to go wrong. Your expectations are so high. The object of the affection is brought into association with the hereditary drive for race preservation. In the presence of the love object, emotions run high and the endocrine glands are brought into play, which increases the circulation of blood rushing to the face, causing bloodstream. Am I saying that word right? Endocrine?
Endocrine?
Endocrine. Okay. Pronouncing the I, long I, the again. Okay. So, most children have had the feeling of shame associated with reproduction and the opposite sex. They have been shamed out of doing things or even of making inquiries about things relating to sex. And many of them have thus abnormally conditioned in reference to all actions that through association connect up with the reproductive desires, even in their finer and nobler expressions. That their thoughts associate an individual with these irrepressible desires. The early conditioning of shame, frustration, or other emotions quickly leads to the thought of further failure. Yet the individual may not be able to force himself to speak to the object of his affection, or if he does so, he may stammer and make puerile remarks instead of the witty things he has rehearsed. He may appear awkward or commit blunders that are quite foreign to his ordinary patterns of behavior. I actually saw that happen. A friend of mine, and we were in the military, and we were just done this exercise. So we call it going into the box. We're doing the exercise with all the Army guys and everything. So we're just like, nasty looking, stinky, sweaty, icky. But she has like really, really blonde hair, and she's a really pretty girl. And this boy walked up to us, just another Army guy, and he walked up to us, and he's looked at my friend, and he wanted to say something to her. And I didn't know this really existed. This kid was like, hi, I'm, and he said his name, and I was like, is this for real? Are we on camera? I was like, she's like, okay, spit it out. What do you want to say? And he was like, no, I'm sorry, I can't think right now. And he's like, and I'm like, oh my God. That's a perfect example of the stammering and the self-consciousness and the painful bashfulness in front of the opposite sex. And I was like, wow, that really happens. I couldn't believe it.
So did he get a date?
No. I didn't say anything. We just said, all right, we're walking back. We're good. Okay. So the cause of this person's backward behavior is due to an overconditioning in the past, which has associated the intense drive for race preservation with images which are quite different from the actions his objective consciousness intends. This person puts such great importance on his own character of behavior that the auto-suggestion of looking bad or becoming a failure creates a negative desire. It is these energetic images which intrude and warp the actions of the person into the negative desires realization. Now, a lot of people have that with speaking in front of people, like speeches. Did you guys have that in high school?
Making speeches?
In high school. Didn't you get like all nervous and, and
sure.
crazy, right? And so what happened? Then you do it more and more as you become an adult, and over time, like my face used to turn red. I get shaky in high school, But see, so another way to get through that is just do it over and over and over again. Anything that's really painful, you just keep doing it, and then you get better at it. And the military helped because I used to have to get up and read a safety thing or something card every morning, or do a weather briefing, So then that got me out of it and getting more comfortable. And look at me now, I'm a teacher. Or a discussion leader, however you want to talk about it. So,
well, this is interesting how he talks about the negative image is really a desire. You never think of yourself as wanting some negative thing to happen.
Right.
But maybe...
But see, in this case, and a lot have happened, what you think of is your mind starts rolling and you think of the failure. And often, if I think back to those times, it is the thought and the emotion and the direction of your thoughts are in the failure. Mm-hmm. And that is what will come to be. Until you just go away from that, failure happens to everybody, and just work through it. Mm-hmm. and then your attention can be in the direction of success, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I already read this, right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about complexes. How are complexes formed?
Bravo, Yvette.
That's how the first complex is formed. Okay, so complex is a group of thought structures within the astral body that are conditioned so that their desire energies tend to release in a common direction. That means like in the same direction. The psychologists call any group of ideas that belong together and have the same emotive tone a complex. And the dictionary definition is an integration of impulses, ideas, and emotions related to a particular object activity, largely unconscious but strongly influencing the individual's attitudes and behavior. Popularly, an exaggerated dislike or fear is a complex. So a complex is a group of mental factors that are unconsciously associated by the individual with a particular subject or connected by a recognizable theme and influence the individual's attitude and behavior. Jung described a complex as a node in the unconscious that may be imagined as a knot of unconscious feelings and beliefs detectable indirectly through behavior that is puzzling or hard to account for. Okay, I think I get this from Wikipedia. Yeah, I think this is Wikipedia information. I thought I had written down that. This is all Wikipedia. Jung found that evidence for complexes very early in his career in the word association tests he conducted at Zurich University. In these word association tests, a researcher read a list of words to each subject, who was asked to say as quickly as possible the first thing that came to mind in response to each word. Researchers timed subject responses and noted any unusual reactions such as hesitations, slips of the tongue, and signs of emotion. Jung was interested in patterns he detected which hinted at unconscious feelings and beliefs. So remember Zane was talking about do the word association for your affirmation? I think he's heavily drawing from this time when Jung and Freud was out with psychology. So.
Freud was heavily influenced by Freud, for sure.
Yeah, Jung was heavily influenced by Freud.
Well, Jung was too, but what did I say?
You said Freud influenced by Freud.
I was going to say Zane, C.C. Zane.
Oh.
Just paying attention to it. That's for sure.
By Freud.
Zane, okay, yeah, Freud,
That's just what I
yeah.
was thinking.
Okay. Okay, so he talks about a little bit more about Jung's theory. Complexes may be conscious, partly conscious, or unconscious, and may be related to traumatic experiences, or not. There are many kinds of complexes, but at the core of any complex is a universal pattern of experience or archetype. Some of the key complexes Jung wrote about were the anima, which is like a node of unconscious beliefs and feelings in a man's psyche relating to females, the animus, the corresponding complex in a woman's psyche, and the shadow, Jung's term embracing any aspect of the psyche which has been excluded from the conscious awareness. Only when a complex results in destructive behavior would it be seen as pathological. Otherwise, a Jungian view of the psyche accepts the presence of diverse complexes in ordinary health. And it did go on to say that the differences between Freud and Jung was Freud believed that everybody had the Oedipus complex, the mother-father thing, and Jung was willing to bring out these three things. And so, that's when they started diverging. Jung started pulling away from Freud, and Freud believed, no, everybody has an Oedipus complex. That's all there is.
It's the very core of our being.
Right. So the word complex is applied to a system of ideas that have an unusually high emotional content. Those that have in some manner become overconditioned and thus, because of the tremendous desire energy they contain, are dominating in their influence. So now we're back to Zane here. Such complexes are mentioned here because suggestion often has played an important part in the formation of complexes, and because they in turn have a power that determines whether or not a suggestion or affirmation will release desire energies in the direction intended or in the direction of negative desires. So I wanted to, the power of suggestion during younger years definitely plays a part in forming complexes, good or bad. When I was young, I'm going to give you an example. When I was young, my sister told me that hot dogs were made with chicken beaks and chicken feet. And I believed her. I didn't eat hot dogs for years. So there was a suggestion that I believed. And I didn't have to believe her because she told me lots of things that didn't prove out to be, true. Even when I was young, I knew that. And yet, it formed like a complex.
You bought that one.
But I think of all those things that we were told as kids from somebody, just a suggestion. And then it forms in us, and we believe it or not, So anyway, suggestions play a role. What I wanted to say. Okay, some people have a complex in reference to a certain political idea. Okay, I'm going to read some more about Zane from the book right here before I go on to read that. Okay, so some people have a complex in reference to a certain political idea. They have thought about the injustice of certain economic conditions or about what seems to them the foolishness of some economic measure so intensely that they have endowed this idea with a vast amount of energy. The more they discuss it and talk about it, the more feeling energy they contribute to the desires associated with the idea. If in their various discussions with others, they are strongly opposed to a political idea, strong emotions, such as anger, develops in the effort to overcome this opposition from others. Thus, as a result of keeping the matter before their minds and repeatedly charging it with emotion, it accumulates so much energy that whenever the complex is tapped, the behavior becomes somewhat abnormal. So we can all relate to that, right? And politics and religion is often those two topics that everybody says you don't talk about with other people. And it's because there is emotional energy involved in it. You can't, with some people, you can't just have a discussion. I believe this and I believe that. No, it turns into emotion behind it, and then anger, and then frustration, and then, before you know it, you're not friends anymore just because you have a difference of opinion of political or religious ideas, right? It happens to us all the time. And I don't know, I think like accepting that everybody has their own opinion, and just allowing it to just be different. Mm-hmm. I'm different from you, Vicki. You're different from me and my beliefs. Right. Hey, we're all different.
But we sure have a lot in common, too.
We do. And finding that commonality and not talking about when we're having a difference of opinion. And if we can't talk about it, we can't talk about it. There's certain things I can't talk to my mother about.
Right.
It's just a difference of opinion, and the emotion comes in, and it's just like, leave it. So, in the presence of this individual, if a religion or socialism or political graft, or the indecency of present-day movies, or the horrors of war, or some special subject is mentioned, that person becomes so highly excited that their speech and conduct are exaggerated. But most of us are more or less touchy in reference to some things. I always find it so interesting what's going on in his present-day world, and you can kind of see, economics playing a big role now. Played a big role in his time, too.
Yeah. Well, this is almost a mirror of the time that he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me. Everything. The indecency of present-day movies.
That's probably always been an issue.
Right.
Don't you think, for some?
And I would say right now the indecency of present-day movie stars.
Yeah.
We moved on from the movies just to the people making the movies. And this means that in the conditioning of the past, more energy has been added to certain thought groups in our astral bodies than their importance warrants. When something associated with one of these over-conditioned thought groups is brought to the attention, This releases their desire energies, which are strong enough to make us feel and perhaps act out of proportion to what the situation normally requires. Like that cat in the house.
Euphoria.
I demand euphoria. Some complexes may be repressed, and these are the ones that cause the most difficulty within a person. So then you have complexes, and then you have repressed complexes. These repressed complexes are so strongly opposed by other desires as to prohibit their expression in any recognizable form and are a source of perpetual conflict. So that repression just adds more and more energy, right? If it's not out there, then it's... And this conflict continues to add feeling energy to the repressed desire complexes. Objective consciousness attributes this feeling energy to other causes because the person will not admit that the repressed desire even exists. Like when people don't even want to have that desire, and so they repress it and pretend like they don't have it. Right? So Zane gives these examples of repressed complexes. People who are overly touchy about any number of subjects because their desires from these subjects are repressed and they want to project the issue onto others so people won't look at them. Example, and these are my words. Certain politicians in their sex life have come into view in media lately. Those are the ones that are strongly opposed to one thing or another, and then we find out they're doing exactly what they're opposed to. Because they're repressing that, right?
Right.
They're repressing those desires, whatever.
Right.
And then Zane gives these two other repressed desire complexes, which he explains. Inferiority complex. Okay, he explains it somewhere. How did I have that? It'll be in here somewhere. So the unconscious mind, which is the soul, refuses to consider itself to have no significance. I added that word soul because we know it's the same thing. But some people, some people think they have no significance, right? But I think what he's saying is our soul does not believe it has no significance. It will refuse to believe that. Every person has the wish and the will to be superior in some respect. And I wrote that unconsciously, at least, if not consciously. As a matter of fact, each soul is struggling to develop those qualities which will enable it to fill in the blueprint of its ego and thus occupy a position in the cosmic work that no other soul could so successfully occupy. Oh, wait a minute. Here it is. I'm sorry. Back here, when I was talking about the Messiah and the persecution complexes, I have it written here. You guys want to hear it?
Yes.
Sure. Okay. It's like, I know I wrote it somewhere. Okay, so reformer complexes or Messiah complexes are the projection to the outside world of conflicts within the unconscious mind. The individual's drive for significance does not permit him to recognize he has desires which are not in conformity to the moral code which his objective mind has accepted. The struggle within himself gives him the feeling that something is radically wrong and needs remedying. And in Zane's book it says, see birth chart of Billy Sunday in Mental Alchemy. So that guy, I guess, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, but maybe he was
Reformer
like
complex.
a Jim Jones or...
Yeah, apparently he was a big, strong Christian person back then.
Right.
I don't know.
He's going to save the world.
Yeah.
Probably too little, yes.
Probably. The repressed complex, struggling to find some outlet for its energy, finally does so through the avenue of endeavoring to correct the ills of the sin-infested world. So, in other words, right. Rejection. Another one of the same manner is the persecution complex. The individual develops a war within himself, which he projects to the outside world. Or a person may develop a strong sense of significance that he frequently gives to his unconscious mind, the suggestion that he is quite a superior person. When this person fails or when misfortune befalls him, instead of perceiving its true source of origin, which is usually his own character, he cannot admit that in any way he could be to blame. More and more he blames other people for his real or imaginary misfortunes. and thus develops the persecution complex in which he believes there is a conspiracy against him. Should this complex develop far enough to cause him to take action to destroy some supposed enemy, he thus becomes a danger to society. And we've seen that on the rampages in office buildings and in schools. Often they absolutely had a persecution complex, right? And that's when they went out and acted on it. It's crazy.
A question,
Yeah.
if I may.
Sure.
Does he draw a distinction between a complex and the reality of being persecuted? Or is it a complex because
No.
one has acted irrationally upon the reality of the persecution? What do you think?
I think you're right. It's the irrational belief because, yeah, I mean, you know, there are some people that are being persecuted, right?
Of course, unfortunately.
Right. And there's physical evidence for that. And often those are the people that aren't out there going, hey, I'm being persecuted, I'm being persecuted. They're often the ones struggling silently to fix the problem. It's the ones that are saying, oh, I'm persecuted, and you can't find anything for it. So I would say you're right. It's like the irrational, you know,
That helps define the classification of complex.
Right. And even in Jung said that everybody might have a complex and a normal part of healthy behavior. It's only when it becomes
Aberrated?
yeah, or it becomes pathological, when it is very negative and it creates negativity around everything, around other people, I think.
The persecution complex is the instance of the person who is fired, good cause,
Right.
but they refuse to accept that about themselves.
Right, so yeah, illogical and imaginary. Right.
Right.
That would be like the negative. Right, absolutely. So now we're going to talk about inferiority complex.
I'm still looking at that image. I know. I want you to tell me why you chose that image.
I don't know why she's watering his head, though.
She's nurturing his inferiority complex.
I think that's what it is. She's like a codependent.
Where do you find these?
Oh, this was like the hardest thing to find. I just type on Google and I put inferiority or superiority complex, and I'm looking for like good pictures, not just pictures of people or something. I'm looking for like a one picture that kind of brings in the whole thing, and I had the hardest time looking for inferiority pictures that were good that I could use. I thought that was a good one. So back to here. The unconscious mind, the soul, refuses to consider itself to have no significance. Every person has the wish and the will to be superior in some respect, unconsciously at least, if not consciously. As a matter of fact, each soul is struggling to develop those qualities which will enable it to fill in the blueprint of its ego, and thus occupy a position in the cosmic work that no other soul could so successfully occupy. And I wrote, everyone wants to feel special in some way, manner, or form. And we are all special and unique in our own way, and yet we are all very ordinary as well. This is like that duality issue, right?
Right.
We all want to feel like we have some special quality that nobody else has, and at the same time we all want to kind of blend in and be like everybody else.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's such a beautiful concept, but it sure gets warped a lot, doesn't it?
Exactly. Therefore, no matter how inferior an individual may appear to feel around others, in some manner the person ever seeks to establish his or her superiority. She may satisfy this feeling of superiority through the facing of obstacles and overcoming them, or if he cannot overcome these obstacles, he may at least find a feeling of superiority in some activity which is beneficial to him and to society. On the other hand, instead of facing his obstacles, he may run away from them and gain the feeling of superiority through various venues of evasion, such as daydreaming, nervous breakdown, dementia precox, which I didn't know what was, it's schizophrenia, or some other form of behavior which is inimical both to himself and to society.
Dude, I'm sorry about
I gotta have some humor in all this complexes. But, okay, so, like, this is, like, the evasion of things that we can't do. When I come across an obstacle, when I'm going through these classes here, and I come up with something, I get frustrated, I have to put it away, and what I do is I do a very simple solitaire on the computer. I do a few solitaires. And to me, that's kind of avoiding the obstacle, but it also, it feels like I'm solving a problem. So I feel like I'm actually accomplishing something, and then when I feel better, then I can go back and go through the frustration, whatever I'm feeling, or whatever, and work through it. But it's like, you kind of have to go away, do something that makes you feel good, and then you have to come back to it.
Right.
Well, that's what I've learned to do. Significance is usually measured in terms of human comparisons, and thus a child may get the suggestion that in most abilities he is quite inferior. A youngster is brought up in the company of brothers and sisters who, because they are older, can do everything better than he can. May also thus get the suggestion that in all ordinary accomplishments he is handicapped by lack of ability, especially if he is constantly reprimanded for not doing better. So, we can all relate to that idea, right? What?
He wrote it the proper number of times.
How many times?
13 transformational.
Really? I really good.
That transformational number.
Right? But
You have to
how
count those?
I was
You
compelled,
instantly know.
He was compelled.
I'm compelled to do this.
13 minutes, 13.
I wish I had, you know, that kind.
No, they say that you can only count up to 5. Most people, I think this was in Christopher's class. 4 or 5 is the number that you can just look at it, recognize it. Beyond that, you have to count. Children who are ridiculed by their schoolmates because their clothing is shabby, or who are shamed because of the eccentricity of a parent, or who constantly are scolded by their elders, sometimes permit these suggestions to build into their unconscious minds an unreasonable feeling of inferiority where ordinary undertakings are concerned. It is not whether the child is really inferior or superior that gives force to the suggestion. It is what his unconscious mind accepts as a measure of his own abilities. If he feels that he is handicapped in his efforts to express superior qualities, this constitutes a suggestion. Yet whether that suggestion is accepted and to what extent is determined by the previous conditioning of the drive for significance. That is, by the thought structure relationships mapped in the birth chart. So some people are probably more susceptible to certain suggestions based on their birth charts. There's other people that they could hear they're doing poorly, they don't care. They just keep on going.
Something like a prominent moon or prominent Neptune.
What would that show them? What prominent
Well,
moon would be more
probably
susceptible?
They would be more receptive to suggestion.
Oh, okay.
They, you know,
And
they're
negative.
less likely to filter. It's more absorbing.
Interesting. So a prominent moon or a prominent Neptune?
Maybe even Pluto, right?
I don't know.
I think
I'm
maybe
curious.
I think Pluto. That's why people in groups can come under suggestion,
Ah.
and because that's the upper octave of the moon.
Two children, although both are conditioned by their environment and brought up under exactly the same circumstances, may develop opposite trends because one accepts the suggestions from without and the other opposes outside suggestions and allows his inner auto-suggestions of great intensity to feed his thoughts. Any one of a wide variety of circumstances may be responsible for building the unconscious mind an inferiority complex. And this happened to me and my sister. We're totally different, not the one you've met, but the other one. She totally opposite from me, my brother, and my other sister. And we were all brought up in the same household, same parents, same everything. And everybody's different. Different birth chart, I guess. Whenever a person thinks of his handicap, real or imaginary, his sense of frustration adds more emotional energy to the thought organization related to the drive for significance. The very fact that the drive for significance is repressed in its normal channels of expression by the thought group built into the unconscious mind, through suggestions arising out of the past experiences, tends to cause its desire energy to gain a very high state of tension. Did you get all that? That was a long sentence. Yeah. Okay. We say the individual is thus over-conditioned in all matters relating to the unconscious feeling of superiority. Because of the over-intensity of his desire to be superior, he tends to set too high a standard for himself. Thus, the person with an inferiority complex has built up, as opposed to, and in conflict with, the suggestion of inferiority, an image of so great superiority that it may be quite beyond any human realization. His inferiority complex thus energizes negative desires that cause him to blunder. So Zanes talks a lot about the over-conditioning of things. So it's not just plain old conditioning, it's like too much. Okay, so then Wikipedia, inferiority complex is a feeling that one is inferior to others in some way. Such feelings can arise from an imagined or actual inferiority in the afflicted person, is often unconscious, and is thought to drive afflicted individuals to overcompensate, resulting either in spectacular achievement or extreme, I can't even say that word, behavior.
Schizotypal.
Okay. Or both.
Or typo.
That works.
Okay. Unlike a normal feeling of inferiority, which can act as an incentive for achievement or promote discouragement, an inferiority complex is an advanced state of discouragement, often embedding itself into one's lifestyle and sometimes resulting in a retreat from difficulties. Causes are parental attitudes and upbringing, disapproving negative remarks and evaluations of behavior, emphasizing mistakes and shortcomings determine the attitude of the child before the age of 6. Physical defects such as disproportional facial and body features, weight, height, strength, speech defects, and defective vision cause inferiority complexes. Mental limitations cause feelings of inferiority when unfavorable comparisons are made with the superior achievements of others, and when satisfactory performance is expected. Social disadvantages and discriminations, family, race, sex, sexual orientation, economic status, religion, or color. All those things can cause the inferiority complex. Now let's talk about the opposite, superiority complex. You see the cat?
Tap. Is he rejecting the tap water?
Yes, tap water, as if.
An image of Garfield.
I'm a
right
cat.
there, huh? just Garfield. Superiority complex.
Right. Yeah, Perrier only for me.
Yeah.
Any complex which brings in the energy of one of the 3 hereditary drives has possibilities of exerting a tremendous pressure upon the thoughts and actions. Any one particular desire can be overconditioned through gaining sufficient emotional energy from experience or suggestion. And there it is, the experience, like you had, Vicki. Once you had the experience of falling, then it just, no.
Well, it's powerfully implanted until I can change that.
Right. And then it's hard to just try to get away from that thought, right? Once that thought starts it just comes up automatically. And you're like, I don't want to think about falling. I don't want to think about falling.
Right.
I'm going to fall.
Right. Well, what I have determined that I will do is that I'm just going to picture myself. I'm going to picture those places that give me a little trepidation.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to see myself, my bicycle doing as it used to do, just zooming past.
There you go. So now you're creating, you don't have to use the words of an affirmation, but you're creating an image, which gives it energy.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I know I can do it because I've done it before.
Right. A lot more times than you've fallen, right?
Right.
Okay. Any one particular desire can be overconditioned through gaining sufficient emotional energy from experience or suggestion. Okay. By overconditioned, is meant that it has desire energy stored up in it under too great attention to favor normal thinking and efficient action. So that's what it means by overconditioning. Most people inherently have the desire to be superior, and I wrote unique or important because it might be like some people just want to be unique, right? It's not necessarily superior. In some respects, so it often requires no great amount of erroneous conditioning to be built up, enough tension energy in the thought cells having to do with superiority that its release leads to abnormal behavior. Likewise, an individual only acquires a superiority complex when the same group of thoughts relating to superiority gain an overbalancing supply of desire energy. You may well ask, how can one person have an inferiority complex from the overconditioning of the superiority thought cells, and another person have a superiority complex from the same overconditioning of those same superiority thought cells? The answer is, when the negative desires direct the attention to certain images of inferiority, the energy goes into those images. But when the attention is directed to images of exaggerated importance in all that the individual does, the person thinks and acts as if he were quite superior to other people. So there's the difference. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Perhaps his parents or relatives have started early to applaud each thing he did or said, always telling others in his presence how unusually bright he was. And this is what's forming a superiority complex. Give an example. Perhaps the parents or relatives started early to applaud each... I wrote that, didn't I?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. So these suggestions in childhood would be such as to cause him to believe that anything he says or does a little more perfect than what anyone else says or does. Is anybody a single child in here? No? Okay. Have you ever noticed a single child often has a touch of that?
A touch?
Yeah, in different ways.
How generous.
I'm trying to be.
They haven't had brothers or sisters to knock it out.
Exactly. And I almost believe like having brothers and sisters is actually much of benefit, you know. There's a lot of disadvantage to being an only child, I've seen. You know,
According to a Time magazine article I recently
Yeah.
read, that doesn't necessarily hold true.
That's right. I mean, I haven't done any empirical data for it.
Just an observation.
It's just what I've seen.
Yeah, it's a stereotype.
Right. Right. Okay. This person's attention was so often directed to his extraordinary abilities, and he gained so much emotional satisfaction from the constant applause that it built up an unusual amount of energy into the drive for significance. I love cats. I think they have an inherent belief of their superiority.
Is he sitting on a pig's head? Oh dear.
I think all cats have that superiority complex. An individual with a superiority complex has so much energy associated with thoughts of his own superiority that it gives dominating power to any thoughts and images into which that energy flows. This person would not be a good team worker because he feels the urge so strongly to demonstrate his unusual talents and usually only works for praise and glory rather than to help the common cause along. This is because this person has been overconditioned to take delight in the praise of his cleverness and talent. And you can't always just blame this person. It's, you know, when you're being raised, you can't control the situation, right? So that's where good parenting comes in, I guess.
Or bad.
If, however, the person with a superiority complex finds too great a difficulty in adjusting himself to his failures, he may, as already explained, develop a persecution complex. One thing he will not do is that he will not admit he is to blame for any failure. That is so frustrating, people do that. Boy. Thus, in seeking some seemingly reasonable cause, he may consider that the world treats him unjustly. We've all seen that, right?
Mm.
Like you said, the person that gets fired because they're really not a very good worker. And they blame everybody else. right?
Yep.
Okay, so then here's the definition. This is the Wikipedia. An exaggerated feeling of being superior to others. A psychological defense mechanism in which feelings of superiority counter or conceal feelings of inferiority. The term superiority complex in everyday usage refers to an overly high opinion of oneself. In psychology, it refers to the unrealistic and exaggerated belief that one is better than others. This is juxtaposed to inferiority complex sufferers, in whom this develops as a way to compensate for unconscious feelings of low self-esteem or inadequacy. It's kind of sometimes hard to tell the difference between the one. One's just compensating for inferiority, and one actually believes in their superiority. And now we're talking about compensation. I thought it was cute.
2 plus 2 equals hungry?
Hungry. I went with my gut feeling.
That's funny.
Okay. So, as the energy of the 3 hereditary drives cannot be successfully repressed, nor can that of any highly energized desire, when one channel is blocked, the energy seeks and finds some substitute outlet. Thus, a desire that is blocked in one channel of expression is said to compensate by expressing through another substitute channel. Those people, for instance, who, if we did not look deeper, we might believe they had a superiority complex, and more often than not are compensating for an inferiority complex. The individual with an inferiority complex feels the need of impressing others because he is so uncertain of himself. Feeling himself to be inferior, he tries to overcome his imaginary handicap by living in a world of make-believe. In his stories, in his boasting, in his strutting assurance, he's playing a part, presenting himself to the world as he would like to be. But because so much energy is dammed up behind the desire to be important, in this compensating outlet, he tends to overdo the part. If you guys ever watched The Next Generation, Star Trek The Next Generation, there was a good example of Barclay. He would go into the imaginary world, like a virtual holodeck, and he would always be like, he was the captain of the ship and ladies' man and all that, and then he'd come back out and he was like this coward guy that, you know what I mean? Even though he's smart and, you know, but he just couldn't live up to that, I guess. Bullying those who are weaker does not arise from a superiority complex, but as a compensation for the feeling of inferiority. The youngster or adult who resorts to such practices feels the need of proving to himself that he is not so powerless as the inferiority complex makes him seem. Even the dynamic go-getter who makes the sale when others fail and who gets more work accomplished than his fellows is compensating for a feeling of inferiority. In spite of the fact that the thought cells have overconditioned the desires relating to superiority, giving them terrific driving power, he is able to keep before his mind the images of the things he wants to do. His desires thus release in the direction of these images and are not toward negative images. Thus, all the energy of the complex is directed, in spite of the recurrent inferiority feelings, into channels of real accomplishment. So he says that, you know, inferiority complex can actually drive one to actually achieve a lot, right? Unless he's failing, and then he doesn't want to take blame for it.
And then he goes into fantasy.
Yeah. Or however people express in all various ways, right?
I think so.
Okay, and this is from Wikipedia. In psychology, compensation is a strategy whereby one covers up consciously or unconsciously weaknesses, frustrations, desires, feelings of inadequacy or competence in one life area through the gratification or drive towards excellence in another area. Compensation can cover up either real or imagined deficiencies in personal or physical inferiority. I remember hearing this story about this one kid who, out of fear to fail, he was driven to be a successful lawyer and like just a drive for it. And he was a successful lawyer. And then when he was practicing law and really a go-getter. And then he just realized that all of this came from his deep-seated fear of actually doing this, but it drove him to do it. I was like, well, that's fascinating.
It's motivation.
I guess, right? It's a negative motivation, but it gets you there. I don't know.
Will.
Whatever works, maybe.
I would think that's more common than not.
Really?
Or
I
I
would
think
think,
so.
yeah.
So that means that we should develop an inferiority complex so we can get something done?
No, I'm just saying, I think that there are a lot of people out there who are
Compensating.
concerned about their, their position, their place in the world. So they go out and that's their motivation.
Yeah.
And they overcompensate. But, I mean, I may be wrong.
They're fully aware that they have a deficiency, and that's
Yeah.
the uncomfort of that.
Right,
It
it makes
motivates
them go
them
out and
to
compensate for it,
conquer, sure.
overcompensating.
Yeah. The compensation strategy, however, does not truly address the source of this inferiority. Okay, this is all Wikipedia, okay? I just find it fascinating in psychology. So, address the source of the inferiority. Positive compensations may help one to overcome one's difficulties. On the other hand, negative compensations do not, which result in a reinforced feeling of inferiority. There are two kinds of negative compensation. One is overcompensation, characterized by a superiority goal, leads to striving for power, dominance, self-esteem, and self-devaluation. And then an undercompensation, which includes a demand for help, leads to a lack of courage and a fear of life. I think I had that when I was in high school. When I was getting ready to graduate, and I was so scared of life. I said, I'm just going to become a bag lady. That's what I do. And that way, anything I did above that was going to be successful. So I went to the lowest point first, and I said, yeah, I'm just going to shoot for that. Anything else is going to be better. So that was undercompensation. A well-known example of a failing of overcompensation is observed in people going through a midlife crisis. Approaching midlife, many people, especially men, lack the energy to maintain their psychological defenses, including their compensatory acts. So there is where it can fail. If you've been compensating all your life, like that lawyer guy I was telling you about, he probably came in midlife and recognized that he was compensating for this fear all his life, and then it fell apart. You know, you can't hold up that it's like imaginary. You know what I mean? You can't hold it up forever, and they say that's what usually happens.
Well, like Zane, at some point earlier in your slides, you talked about how Zane says that we all have a unique, a blueprint that we're trying to fulfill,
Right.
and that you assume that if you are fulfilling it, it feels good. That you have a sense of who you are in proper relationship to other people. But if you reach midlife and all of a sudden you realize you've been doing this thing that you don't even know where it comes from. It's like, why am I doing this?
Is that when your whole life falls apart and you just go off and get I don't know.
Some people, or at least they question it.
Right?
Maybe that's a good thing to question. I don't know.
Yeah. I met this guy that said he went to Mexico and he built himself a treehouse and he lived off of fishing and did that for a while. I was like, wow. Just get outside of life, get everything away.
So I like stickman dreaming of power. Is that a power ball? No, a
Yes.
PowerPoint or no? What is that?
It's a pencil.
Oh, it's a mechanical pencil.
Number
okay.
two.
I love that too.
Number two
If
medium.
only I could be like God.
Right.
I could not be as skinny. Okay, so affirmation should keep the attention on the image of that to be accomplished. Like you said, not falling. The image of, I ride that thing so many times and I've not fallen, that's what I'm going to keep my attention on. The most essential factor in the successful application of suggestion and affirmation is that the image should be in the center of the attention. Then to give the image strength for accomplishment, it should be linked up with as powerful desire energies as possible. Those are the three hereditary drives serve this purpose admirably. So you have to look for your drive to significance. Oh, that's crazy. This looks like green, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Green color.
A little bit.
Look at what it looks like on the computer. It's peach.
Hmm.
It's a crazy
Oh,
color.
underneath. Yeah.
RGB.
It's what you call losing something in translation.
Lost in translation. Okay.
We're still quoting Zane here.
Yes, this is Zane stuff. The negative form of an affirmation should never be used. I highlighted that, of course. If you offer the affirmation, I am not ill, it draws the attention of the unconscious mind to the thought of illness and gives the illness more energy. In the effort to overcome the tobacco habit, if you use the affirmation, I no longer crave tobacco, it will almost invariably increase the craving for whatever energy the suggestion releases and is directed into the thought of tobacco craving. So, yeah, you want to use the negative of it. I am not this, I am not that. Just do the positive.
You mean like, I thank the universe due to the fact that I'm a non-smoker?
There you go. That's a positive. That's a great example.
Thank you. I do my best.
I think I only have like 82 slides, so we got 4 left. We got 45 minutes. Yeah, okay. The correct application of affirmations would require only that the suggestion be given in terms that would portray what is to be accomplished, and that it should be given positively at a time when the objective mind is inactive, and thus not setting up counter images. One person repeating the affirmation, I am well, just before going to sleep and just at the moment of awakening, while in the border state between sleep and waking, may be greatly benefited. Or any affirmation, right then, before going to sleep and right before waking up. I guess that's like,
Yeah, seems to me like a good neutral word too.
well,
Mm-hmm.
I am well.
Yeah, because that can apply to a lot of things.
Were you going to say?
This stands as a prime example of little occult tidbits
Really?
of tremendous usefulness that Zane places here and there without any particular order.
Yeah.
They just show up. That twilight zone between wake and sleep
Right. Yeah, I mean,
connects one very, very well to the non-physical world.
Absolutely.
Or at least puts you right in the doorstep.
right. And yeah, you're right. And the thing about it though, it's just kind of, it's just in the book, like as you're reading along, where I feel like, here's some important things.
Exactly.
Notice this. This
Yeah.
is important. And yet it's just kind of like in there. You're like, oh, hey. But the matter is not so simple as this, because the same suggestion offered to one person connects up with the desire energies and images that have been conditioned in one way, yet when offered to another person, connects up with the desire energies and images which are conditioned to release energies in the opposite direction. So you gotta know yourself what works best for you. In the matter of suggestion and affirmation, it is not what the objective mind believes that is important, only what strong images are that are in the unconscious mind. So often we can think we believe one thing consciously, but our unconscious mind has another opinion. So you have to go with what the unconscious is. If the disbelief in the objective mind is strong enough and repeated enough to build a counter image in the unconscious mind, so that the counter image gets the unconscious attention instead of the image suggested, the suggestion will merely draw more energy into this opposite image. Thousands of people are healed of various complaints who are decidedly skeptical in their objective minds as to the possibilities of such methods, like prayer, affirmation, suggestion. Religious belief is one of the strongest organizations in the unconscious mind that can readily be used to get the attention and energy for suggested thoughts, because it connects up with the religious urges in the thought organization of the astral body as they were conditioned in childhood. How much is accomplished by the affirmations or other suggestions is determined by the amount of desire energy they can enlist through their associations and the attention given them by the unconscious mind. The direction in which these energies will work depends not necessarily upon the thoughts suggested, but upon the thoughts and images to which the unconscious mind has its attention directed. I cannot judge time. I have 40 minutes.
Bravo, bravo.
See, this would have been a good example where I should have put 2 chapters together, at least started on the other one. But I just didn't, so.
Well, you know,
Comes with practice.
there it goes. I
You-
wonder
you
if
don't mind
anybody has
going home.
questions.
Yeah, questions. Yeah, what were you going to say?
Questions in the peanut gallery.
I would love questions.
There really hasn't been any questions. People are just, we've got several, 4 or 5 people on, but people are just,
Yeah, this was more like psychology. It wasn't so much, in the astral realm as much as some of the other stuff was. So this is kind of just a lot of the psychology.
Right.
And believe me, next week, chapter 9, I've already read through it. Looks really, really interesting, fascinating to me. I think it's going to be a great subject next
Chapter
week.
9, the title of which is
I think it's constructive thinking. Something about that. I can't remember.
and what's the title of 8?
This one
Yes.
is how to apply suggestion
Oh.
or affirmation.
Suggestion, I think.
Suggestion. Yeah. But it's also, it talks about affirmations, which I guess an affirmation is a suggestion.
It is, right?
Right?
Your unconscious
Okay.
mind, yeah.
Neil says they were mesmerized.
Mesmerized. Or bored out of your mind.
Well, speaking of which, congratulations on making an interesting presentation out of a kind of a dry book.
Oh, with a little
Fascinating but
pictures.
dry. Yes. Yeah. Oh, your presentation's nice.
Right, I think that adds to it, you're gonna find some pictures. I'm a very visual person, I like to see, representations and stuff. Visual. But maybe you guys can talk a little bit about the astrology aspect of these things. He says that you can look in your chart, your birth chart, to see where your planets are, to see if you're like susceptible or whatever. And you talked a little bit about the moon and Neptune and stuff being like you'd be more susceptible.
I
To
think
certain-
people with those planets prominent will tend to be more impressionable.
More impressionable.
Right, and less likely to filter, it just comes in, and they're not even, like I know, I have a daughter who has moon rising, and she has Neptune aspecting her ascendant. And I'm amazed at the things that I thought she didn't notice as a kid growing up.
Yeah. Then she just
And now she, I realize those things that I said or did had a huge impact on her. And, you'd think I would have known that since I know astrology, but it's like,
That superiority complex, I would suppose that we who are dominant discordant sons would likely experience it at some point in time or another.
because you're the overcompensation of the sun being not as prominent or discordant. You're saying.
Well, somebody who's a dominant son
Okay. Dominant
is
sun.
not going to
but
be
it's
happy
just-
about taking a back seat anywhere.
I see. Okay.
And if you add discordancy on top of that, it seems to me that the discord would be the hindrance to this individual realizing that a superiority complex was actually developing.
Okay. I get you.
Alchemizing the complex away would leave somebody with hopefully leadership abilities.
Right. Or wasn't it true though that Hitler was compensating for something?
Yes.
Hitler was compensating for like his inferiority. Didn't he have like an inferiority complex or something? He didn't do very well art. He loved art and he tried to be an artist, but he wasn't very good at it.
I think he tried a lot. I think he grew up in he had an impoverished childhood,
Okay.
and I believe there were some issues about his family's position, and I don't remember what it is. I remember years ago reading about Hitler. Do you
Oh,
remember?
What about Messiah complex?
Did he have one of those?
Well,
yeah. Oh, he
I
did.
think he's a good example of what one might look like, because the German people had been seriously oppressed, after World War I.
Right.
What everybody did to Germany after World War I is an example of what you don't want to do, which is why the U.S. did such a good job with Germany and Japan after World War II. Is, getting them back on their feet.
Right. Not
So,
suppressing them,
not just
repressing them.
yes,
Because that's all we did was
Punishing.
scare.
So by the time
repress.
Hitler came around, people were really, the country was doing well. People were very disgruntled. They were looking for a way out of, a pretty nasty economic mess. And, for people that normally have, a high, the Germans have always had a high output, I mean,
Right.
they're power producers.
Yeah.
And so he came along and offered them, a chance to be
Let's go up there.
Superior.
Superior again.
the superior race.
And punished, I mean,
He's
maybe
gonna
he's a
say
bit of
that-
all of it.
Mhm.
Maybe he has a little bit of all those
He could have all
complexes.
those things.
Yeah,
mixed
because
up
he
in
was
one.
into persecuting,
Did he? Yeah. So he kind of took
blamed the
Yeah, he blamed Jews
Yeah.
for,
gypsies.
he looked lots of places for the problems with with the German people.
Now I'm curious if you guys have read anything. If he had the Jews on board with him in the belief, like, hey, let's get Germany back on its feet, let's go with it, let's bring us superior again. If he had brought the Jews with him, that might have been a machine you couldn't even stop.
He might
You know what I
conquer the
mean?
world.
Well,
I mean, because I would think I don't know how they felt about it, or were they opposed to him from the start?
Or were they even all that well? I mean, were they a political entity even, or were they
Yeah, I
just a
don't know.
convenient? Maybe there were. I mean, in this country, even we tended to think like Hollywood.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still considered this way, but it used to be considered to be the province of Jewish people.
Right.
And so,
Well,
but
yeah.
whether that's true or not,
Right.
Well, Jewish people have always been considered in the past. We're getting into racial stereotypes.
Right.
yeah, exactly. That's what I was
We
trying to get away from.
We need
Yeah.
somebody here to keep us, but still, there's always some truth to stereotypes.
Right.
And Jewish people have been noted for their business acumen all over
Right,
the world.
that's what I mean.
Every place they went, they've always done well in business, and so it's easy to look upon them when things aren't going right for you.
Look at the people who are
They're
successful.
the cause of the problem.
Exactly.
They have control of the banks all over
Right.
the world. They have all the money. They're controlling commerce and stuff like that. So,
And
But-
that's
but if
likely
he-
not founded in any kind of reality.
Right.
There's a nucleus
Right.
of truth to it.
and the
That's
Chinese,
all.
right? And the Chinese experience the same thing in Southeast Asia, because it's Chinese that have immigrated to other places tend to be really good business people. And it's also true that the smarter, better business people are the ones that go
That are gonna
immigrate anyway.
immigrate.
So it's kind of, but
Right.
then they, especially like in Thailand, they or Indonesia, or there's a couple of places where they have been persecuted and tried to be marginalized politically, because when things aren't going so bad, everybody looks over at them and, gee, they're making a lot of money,
Right.
Right.
But I'm curious that if you brought, and you didn't persecute a portion of your country, if you brought them along with you on your goal for superiority, that would have been a machine that would have been no stopping if they were on board. And I don't know how some of them felt. But if they were on board with what Hitler wanted to do, if he'd gotten everybody on board, I wonder how powerful that could have been. You know what I mean?
Well, it would have been a whole different thing then.
Right.
In fact, it might have been not even a war machine. Maybe it could have been developing
Economic
an
machine.
because it's
Right,
hard to
it
say
could
what
have
if Hitler did this, because he was such a
See, and he was
Whack.
worse. Right.
by our standards.
Right. Did he have a discordant? Has anybody looked at his chart? Did he have a
Sure.
discordant sun? Did he have a?
We looked at it in
I'm
my
wondering.
case.
Yeah, we have this chart.
That's in astrological signatures.
I don't know. Do you want to see? Do you want to know what?
No, I'm wondering if you know it off the top of your heads or any
No,
any
I mean,
aspect
we
that you
certainly
remember.
looked at it
I
before
know
we
he's
talked
got
about it.
Taurus
Yeah.
marks
In
and
class.
everything.
But it's been few years.
It's been a while, okay. So how does Saturn play a part in like superiority complexes?
Saturn
Yeah,
and a superiority complex?
or an inferiority complex. Does that play a
Well,
role?
Saturn
I'm
impoverishes, so the inferiority, that's an easy call. The opposite would be hard to relate. Somebody at the level of a Donald Trump, who really does have, is psychic for the market and money and
Yeah.
business, and has the discipline to be a success there. I mean, few people could deny that a Rockefeller or a Donald Trump or people of their financial stature are psychic for these things and do well as a result.
Sure.
And if one had a very well regimented business, and maybe Howard Hughes is a better example. One could argue that perhaps he was the most successful businessman in the history of the world at one point in time.
Yeah.
And he had,
And he had
but
complexes.
did he have a prominent Saturn, do you think? Or are you suggesting?
I'm offering suggestions.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
he
right.
doesn't
know.
Well,
Oh,
he may very well
I don't
have,
think
given his
Trump has a
unusual.
prominent Saturn. As I recall, it's more solar Jupiter energy that he has.
Yeah, he
Well,
doesn't
Jupiter.
seem like he has Donald Trump. He doesn't seem like he has like complex. He just seems like he's kind of based on a
He's
little bit
just
of reality.
obnoxious. I think he's a little obnoxious.
Well, yeah, maybe a little touch of the superiority complex.
Do you want to know about Hitler's chart?
Yeah, could you? Because and just
He
saying
has-
where he has what I don't.
Well, he
I don't
has a sun in the
Okay.
7th house.
Okay.
So that makes it prominent. And it's conjunct Mars. Barely.
Mars.
Fairly conjunct. Is that in the orbit? It's
But-
fairly within orbit conjunction.
So that would give him now. Kind of explain that with you when you say that, because I don't know everything.
Sun in the 7th, he never could accomplish
He has-
anything on his own.
Ah,
He has very powerful drives for significance.
with the sun being
And
seven.
it's in Taurus, so it has, the material world is something that's important to him, having material success.
Okay.
But it's also in that first decadent of Taurus, which is
Ah.
Are we still wrong?
rabbit. The opposite decadent to the first decadent of Scorpio, where,
Well, it's Libra rising.
but his sun is in that first decadent
I'm sorry.
of Taurus,
Yes.
which is a very sensitive, psychic, intuitive, and sometimes into magical or
Ah.
other stuff that might be interested in things like that.
So he was into the cult. I've heard that. And
Yeah.
people say no, he
Yeah.
wasn't. Everybody says that he was. I think he was.
Oh,
Whether
I
he
think
used
he
it for
Oh, he
whatever
definitely
he
was.
used.
There's no question about it. It's
What
well
he
documented.
was.
He had an astrologer and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Well, he has Uranus in the 12th house conjuncting his ascendant.
No, okay, so he's
So
got
it's-
Uranus right up.
Yeah.
And Uranus is that planet
Planet
of sudden elevation.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
So, he was an army sergeant.
Right, he was, right?
And then he became the supreme leader. That's a big jump.
Right.
He didn't work his way up.
Okay.
He just had such a powerful, and the whole Uranus thing on his personality was his ability his oration to capture the imagination
Right.
of all those people, mesmerize them, in
Mhm.
fact, to this whole idea of the Aryan race and that they can be dominant, they can conquer the world, and they're better than everybody else.
Right, but they were already oppressed, so they were
They're
willing to
looking
hear
for
that.
that. They wanted to hear that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So that's
he
why
fed
he had
desperate
it.
minds.
If he just did it himself and everybody was fat, dumb, and happy, he wouldn't have had it.
Right.
Exactly. Right. No, the environment was definitely receptive to what he had to.
Exactly. So we have to look at our environment when, we have a great orator that comes along and says, "Hey, I have the answer." Be careful.
Right, exactly.
What's the good topic?
Be careful.
And he has Libra rising, so he had a pleasant personal demeanor. He was,
Wow.
socially attractive to people.
It's very interesting.
But he does have Saturn in the 10th house, at least according to this chart.
Right, right. No, I've heard that. Saturn is in the 10th house. But we don't have the astrodynes on that.
So now,
to see what power he has. Yes, Barbara.
You got a couple of comments there.
Okay.
Terry from Albuquerque says if a person has an inferiority complex, they have to have someone to be superior to be to compensate for their problem. They couldn't bring certain others along with them, then they wouldn't have a basis for someone to be superior to.
Right.
Oh,
So
they
he
have
could-
to relate to
the
somebody
whole-
else.
Right, they have to find somebody to be superior to. So he looked at the Jews, the Slavs, the Poles, and all those people to
Gypsies,
be
everybody.
superior to.
To be superior.
And
Yeah.
Neil put in, Saturn people can look upon others with disdain if they cannot meet their organizational acumen. They find superiority through detailed actions and business acumen as well.
Right, yes.
That's true.
That's definitely true, sure. There's probably a way through each planet to express a certain complex, either way.
Oh, yeah.
There might be.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if
And where
that's
it's
true, but that's
placed.
just what, I think what Neil says is right. That Saturn, is a way, it would try and express its superiority through,
System and
No,
organization.
right, right.
Okay.
Boy, did he build a machine too.
yeah, it did.
when you were delineating his involvement with darker brotherhoods, were you talking about his eighth house planet?
His sun in that
seventh.
first decadent of Taurus.
Oh, okay.
Sun
Well,
in
in
first-
addition to that,
It has special qualities.
It's Lepus,
It
right?
is, it's Lepus, the rabbit. And the rabbit is fleeing.
yeah.
What the rabbit is fleeing from, if you look on the opposite side of the zodiac, is the first decade of Scorpio,
Mhm.
which corresponds to Halloween and black magic and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So, and the whole thing about the rabbit, Zhang talks about, the rabbit's foot and
Fleet
stuff
foot.
like that.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he considers that to be one of the most magical signs, or
Right,
decadence.
the decadence is
Not only
the
sign, but
Taurus
decadent.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And the ability to, be sensitive to those kinds of powers and things.
That's very interesting. The reason
Yeah.
I brought it up is because his eighth house has both Pluto and Neptune.
Right.
Pluto and
And
Neptune.
that, right.
That only bolsters what you're talking about.
Right, right.
So in
that-
other words,
Two psychic houses.
He had great
That's
abilities,
wrong.
but he used it for the wrong reasons. Could we say that?
Yeah.
He rose to the occasion of his environment as he interpreted it.
But it
Yeah.
went in the wrong. It was
And boy,
a
was
negative end
yeah.
result.
Does anybody know if he was aware of having Hebrew blood in his lineage while he was alive, or is that something we found out later?
I don't know. Did we?
I
If he
think
knew,
that,
that must have torn him up.
I think that was something that he was aware of and he ran from.
Yeah, and there's that
I
other
would've-
aspect.
if he knew, that would have torn him up. Jeez,
Or he would have
Okay.
repressed it, right?
Yeah.
And then that
Right,
would have built up
right.
energy, and that maybe that was part of his anger
Right.
and
Exactly.
Right.
push that away. I don't have that repression of yourself, that
Exactly.
aspect of yourself, right?
Yeah.
And to look at everybody else. They're the wrong, they're the evil, or whatever, you know.
Yeah, that's
That's
exactly.
what repression can do, and that's why I'm glad Zane's like, no, repression is absolutely not the answer.
It's very dangerous.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
yes, it's in a sense, it's a denial of reality,
Yeah.
which I would deem very dangerous.
Right. And that's why I think looking into ourselves, that's why I love psychology in general, is the looking in and finding all these things so that we can fix it, right? Because we don't want to just know about it, we want to know how to fix it and make ourselves better. Yeah. So, and the astrology helps to look at that with a mapping of what's potentially there that we can either, work towards the positive or,
The
take
other
away the
thing
negative.
sorry.
No.
The other thing that's interesting, I think, you talk about this is a lot. There's a lot of psychology.
Yeah.
I guess you'd
It's
expect it.
esoteric.
Esoteric psychology.
Inner
The difference
psychology.
is that there's a theory for how it actually works, which is these thought cells that get
Yeah.
built up in the unconscious mind. and it's a theory. Now, it's all theory, but it's a theory which, as Zane points out, explains the facts,
Right.
which is what a good theory should do. And so that's what makes it, and so you can go beyond what's in esoteric psychology using, astrology and looking at people's chart, and of course looking at the obvious things in their life besides their chart. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. It has to do with their stature.
Yeah.
They overcompensate because of their stature. I don't know if anybody does that, but
I don't know any of them.
and so there's a lot that you can dig into when you start thinking about how you can apply this to somebody's chart.
Right. Yeah, and it all plays a role in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, I would like, and maybe there is something there, but like, of course I like the system and organization, because I have prominent Saturn.
Okay.
But okay, so now that we know all this, what are the steps to fix it? Because that's what I'm always looking for, how to get better.
The
And not
lessons
not
is-
just the knowledge of it for the sake of the knowledge.
Right.
I want to use it to something. I want to use it for something.
You have Saturn in the 10th.
Yeah. Prominent Saturn. So I could be that.
No, are you positive or negative aspirants
In
on
Saturn?
the Saturn?
Well, you start out with a
Yeah.
half of
It's a
negative, so how
miracle
can
if
you
it's
even go
positive.
positive except for Bart? Bart's the only one that I know is positive Saturn.
Well, there's
Well,
another,
everybody has
we know
negative
someone
Saturn.
else that has a positive Saturn.
I'm one of those
His
rare
name's
words that has a
Superiority.
positive Uranus.
Okay.
A positive
Yeah,
what?
Uranus.
I mean, if you're
Well, a
like
lot of people
starting,
have positive Uranus.
It's not so rare.
No. Not as rare as having Saturn or Mars be positive.
Yeah. Well,
But you could consider Saturn or Mars if they were just mildly negative. But the whole idea of Saturn is you can turn all that negative energy is easily turned into very positive, constructive behavior.
yeah, playing
So-
solitaire is wonderful.
on every planet.
It gets me all organized and straightened out, and I feel better. But see, that's what I go towards when I get frustrated, is system and organization, right?
Right.
Something that you can control.
And it's mild, and I have a mild addiction to solitaire, sorry, but at least it's very mundane,
So
right?
are politicians. I got a picture of some games during a speech. There was more than one of them playing solitaire on the laptop.
So is your Saturn prominent, or is it not? It's not the top.
My
power
Saturn
planet?
is in the 10th house.
Right.
It's prominent.
So is it the top power planet for your?
No.
Okay.
But it's certainly prominent.
Right.
I mean, no question about that. It's conjunct Mercury, which is my dominant planet. But being conjunct Mercury and in the 10th house anyway makes it prominent.
So he became an engineer.
So I like system and organization too. That's a big
Do you
thing.
play solitaire to get away from
No.
frustration? No.
No, I'm not big on games, but
Me neither. Just that one. I don't want to play any other game. And I don't get pleasure out of it. What I get out of it is a relief from a frustration if I can't get through it.
Right.
It is absolutely, it's not pleasurable. If I'm not frustrated and I'm not doing anything, I do not want to play solitaire. It's the last thing I want to do. So you understand how I use it. It's a tool for me.
right, no, it's a very good example
Yeah.
of what you can do.
So it's not for pleasure. It's not a game.
No,
Yeah.
right. You can use it to calm down, rearrange your thoughts, and prepare yourself for
The next
fixing whatever it is that was the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a great tool. And everybody needs to, can find their own
Little tool.
tool.
I used to abuse my sports car when I was experiencing rage.
Ah. See?
It's a wonderful outlet.
Better than fist through wall, right?
Yes.
Yes, Barb, is there something from
Neil commented on the positive Saturn that Gary was the only person he knows. Well, now he knows too, because he knows me also.
Barb has a positive side.
Alice Marie says, since Venus is the antidote to Saturn, how could it be used to fix around Saturn? And Alice also says, always play music or do art whenever doing Saturn things. That's what I do to get over a negative Saturn experience.
Yes, good.
Sure, that's
So
good.
how do you fix a run amok Saturn?
A run amok Saturn. Well,
Yes.
depends on how it's run amok, right?
Right.
But let's say, you know, if it's Saturn brings increased work, responsibility, and economy or loss. So when a run amok Saturn means you're having to, you know, there's a dearth of something in your life. Could be money, could be whatever. Or
Right.
you're having to work too hard, increased responsibilities, increased work.
So,
And so what you've got to do is you've got to turn your attention from those types of things. First of all, when they're going on heavily, the best thing you can do is make sure that you get regular social and artistic outlets.
that's Venus, right?
The Venus thing. Go to a movie. Do anything. Do it with your friends.
Escape.
You have to make. You have
Socially.
to escape, right? And even escape. Neptune escapes. But you have to make yourself do it, because when you're in that Saturn frame of mind, you don't feel like doing it.
Right.
Okay. Everything looks bleak. So you've got to. It takes work. And then.
It takes the sun.
Right, and then that's the next step. But I was just going to say that trying to recondition Saturn when it's really blasting you is very difficult to do. So you want to make sure you get plenty of the Venus activities and do what you do. Convert it into system. Try and get organized. Be systematic and get organized, which is called conversion. You know, rather than using alchemy, you can also use conversion, which flips the planet from its negative expression to its positive
So that's what
expression.
I'm doing is conversion.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Right. But also because both Venus and Saturn are considered negative, in polarity,
Oh.
you often have to apply the sun. That particular alchemical thing requires, as Vicky points out, thoughts of self-esteem, building up your self-esteem and your importance, your value to people, and feeling good about yourself. You have to try and do things that make you feel good, because it takes, for the mental alchemy to work, it takes all three of those elements together.
The opposite and the sun?
The opposite and the sun.
The
For
goal.
when it's Venus, when it's Saturn.
Oh.
When it's Saturn, it takes, or Venus,
Okay.
you have to apply the opposite antidote, but you also have to apply the sun. So that because you have to often build up, for Venus, you know, people are often very pliant and tend to take the path of least resistance, and they don't, you know, and sometimes because of that, they don't feel good about themselves. So you have to get them to apply some system and organization, but you've got to build up their self-esteem.
I see.
One way to
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
you reminded me of what Aunt Boo used to say about there's this notion that, you know, using the sun, sometimes it's really hard when you're feeling in a negative mood.
Yeah.
If you do have this concept of there's this divine energy out there, or this divine force, this plan or whatever, if you can tap into that,
Yeah.
like she always said, you're not given more, no, what was it
She used to
said?
tell me, because she recognized that I was, you know, I'm telling her, you know, I got so many things to do, I'm so busy, blah, blah, blah. She told me, you have the time to do what you need to do.
And the other side of that
The other
is,
side is what you need to do. And it's like an affirmation. It's just stuck in my mind. It's stuck in my mind to this day, and I still say that.
Right.
I have
And the
the
key
time
word
to
is
do
you
what
need to do.
what
Exactly.
I
Not
need to
everything
do.
you want to do.
Right.
But what you
or
need
not
to do.
everything you think you should do. Sometimes you have to
There you
separate
go.
out what's not yours.
Right, and if
And-
Saturn run amok,
Yeah.
this could be a problem for Saturn run amok, because they're, you know,
Trying to do too much at once.
well, too much work,
Too much
taking
work.
on too much responsibility.
And not letting other people take their fair share, because
And-
you're actually taking away from their self-esteem and opportunities for self-esteem if you do that.
Right.
Yes, right, and feeling like you have too much to do. So it's time to sit down and say, wait a minute.
So,
Use the divine energy thing that Vicky talked about, repeat to yourself that you do have the time and the resources. I have the time and the resources to do what I need to do.
What I need to do. Right. Okay. So a prominent Saturn person could might not delegate too much. They might take all the responsibility themselves,
Right.
and that's one of those. Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
But they can just flip that around and
Give
be
it to
so
everybody else.
organized
I
that
don't want no responsibility.
that they do a good job of organizing stuff so it can be delegated. You know. So,
Right.
I mean, it's
Right.
the flip side. It can be either way.
Right. Well, I watched you do that at bowling too.
In
From
bowling?
doing everything himself to actually delegating everything. It's quite good at that.
But once you do it and then you get used to it, then you're okay.
Well, you get a lot done.
Then you learn it.
Right.
But before you learn it, you might not know how to do it
Right.
until you're forced to or something happens.
Right.
And then you go, oh yeah, I can do this. Okay, yeah.
Of course, everybody at bowling is getting paid to do that.
Right. Well, you know, when you're in a leadership position, you have to know how to delegate because
Right.
any job that you say, gee, I need to do this,
Right.
then you become you put yourself, what we used to say, you put yourself in the critical path. So that means that thing, because you didn't delegate it, now you're stuck with it, and it may or may not get done because you didn't manage it right. Because you're in the middle of it now,
Yeah.
when you should be managing.
Managing, right. I know I had the same hard time, you know, I was never wanted to be a responsible leader or anything because I felt like, all the responsibility was on me now. You know, because I didn't know how to delegate anything either. And it's just over time. I was a trainer, like, in the military. I became a trainer for weather observers. And I had to realize I had to let them, with their own hands in their own way, and I had to step back and let them learn how to do it that way, not me showing them, okay, this is what you do, go here. They don't learn anything. And I learned how to step back and allow that person to be responsible for themselves. You know, I'm just a facilitator. So I had to learn that too, and I understand that concept.
Right.
Feeling like, oh, it's all my responsibility. No. You can delegate it. Yeah. That's cool. We talked about Saturn today with Vegas class. Vegas class seems to mimic what I talk about too. I mean, you know, we're not even on the same page. And one time she did Mars out of sync. She wasn't following an order, and Mars was out of place. And some of the things she was talking about was exactly what I was going to do in my class that day. So it's like, it's weird.
Maybe there's a divine plan after all.
There's so much divine plans there. It's all very interesting. Yeah. So that's interesting about Saturn.
Well, Yvette, thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss this.
Yeah.
This is a great class.
Yeah. So one of these times I'm gonna have to put two chapters together.
So,
There's
are we
two
not,
more classes, right?
Yvette,
There's 3.
Oh, there's 3 more?
And there's 4 more chapters, so.
question.
Yes.
Next Sunday is the 3rd service, so we're still going to do this? 3rd Sunday? Okay.
Well, I'm not going into September. I mean, I could skip next week.
I wanted to
We're just
verify
checking.
that. I'm just checking.
Yeah, I planned on.
Just checking.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah. But I'm definitely gonna split this up if I ever do it again.
Yeah.
After this, I'm not gonna want to teach for a long time.
You'll get over that.
I think it'll grow on you.
And then I'll miss it, and I'll be like, hey, can I teach class again? Yeah. Well, this is my learning experience class, you know, I'm learning everything. Yes.
Neil says, looking forward to next Sunday, so you better be there.
That's right, Neil will be here.
Oh, great, Neil will be here.
yeah.
So is he gonna stay for my class? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, cool, oh, great.
And he says he's going to heckle you.
Okay, no problem. I'll heckle back. Well, good, because next week will be I find it a fascinating chapter. Hopefully you all, I'm going to bring in a lot of good information. So Yay for next week.
Okay,
And I think we're done here. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for sticking with me.
Thanks, Yvette.
And we'll see you next week.
All right.
Sunday service and then the class. Yay! All right.